All right. Good evening, everyone. I still see this is Ed with Sallie Mae. I do see folks are coming in, so we're going to wait just a little bit before we get started. Allow folks to get in before we get started. So we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. All right, gang. I'm gonna give it just a little bit more. We've got a couple of people still entering. We'll give it until 2 after the hour, and then we'll get started. So thank you all for your patience, and we will begin shortly. All right. I do think we're ready to go. It looks like traffic has slowed down. Folks have gotten in their seats, so we're going to get started. So good evening, everyone. Good afternoon to you all on the West Coast. My name is Ed Recker. I am with Sallie Mae, and tonight we're going to be discussing the first step to finding the money you need for college, and that is, of course, by completing the FAFSA. Again, my name's Ed Recker. I am with Sallie Mae, and we're going to get started. So, the agenda for this evening. So, I'm going to give you a little bit more about my background, who I am, and a little bit about Sallie Mae. We're also going to go over some timelines and deadlines when we start talking about the FAFSA. We're going to discuss how you get started, and then we're also going to talk about some naming conventions and considerations as you're completing the FAFSA. All right. So first, a little bit more about me. Again, Ed Recker, Sallie Mae. I have been in the financial aid industry for over 20 years now. So 15 plus of those years was on campus, as started as a financial aid. Uh, oh my gosh, just why am I blanking on this? Just a financial aid advisor, and moved my way up to the financial aid director. And I've been with Sallie Mae for the past 5 years. So doing outreach and really talking about the FAFSA and things of that nature. So welcome everyone. Again, thank you for being here. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded, and my understanding is you will receive a link to the recording. So you can feel free to take notes. You can do whatever you deem appropriate, but know that you will get a recording of the webinar. All right, so let's dive right into the FAFSA. One other thing before we really dive in, gang, there is a way to submit questions through the Q&A function on Zoom. Feel free to submit those questions. I'll pause throughout and answer questions. We will also have time to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So feel free to sit back, listen. You know, oftentimes, folks, your questions will be answered throughout the webinar. But if you really feel like it's something that is really pressing, you want to ask that question, go right ahead and do that in the Q&A function. We will be able to answer those questions. So thanks so much. All right, digging in. So we talk about key FAFSA tips for students. So first and foremost, submit your FAFSA as soon as possible. And I know for this year, that's a little bit of a loaded tip, because much like last year, the FAFSA this year has been delayed. The opening has been delayed. So we do have on there to visit studentaid.gov for the latest on the open date. As of right now, the U.S. Department of Education has very publicly said the FAFSA will be open to everyone on or before December 1st. So I would encourage you all to circle that date on the calendar. I do believe it is a Sunday. So as I smile and I laugh about it, you don't have any excuses, gang. Sunday, you should be off work. You should be relaxing. I'm sure it's going to be a slow day in the NFL. Go ahead, take some time and complete the FAFSA on December 1st when it does open. We also want to remind everyone that almost every student is eligible for some form of financial aid. Very common misconception about the FAFSA is that, hey, I make too much money, or I'm not going to be eligible for something. Everybody is eligible for something, even if it's a low interest rate student loan. With that said, if you're not interested in student loans, we would still encourage you to complete the FAFSA, uh, largely because largely because even colleges and universities, states, they all have different criteria for their gift aid, their free money. So we would encourage you to please complete the FAFSA. Also, just a reminder that the FAFSA must be completed every year. So this isn't something that it's 1 year and done. Every year you have to complete the FAFSA. So again, make sure that every year when it opens, that you do complete that FAFSA. And then also lastly, the last reminder we have is that the financial aid deadlines aren't the same as college admissions deadlines. So we always encourage folks, you know what, make sure that you're keeping in mind what those deadlines are. If a school has an admissions deadline, as well as if they have a, a FAFSA or a financial aid deadline. Make sure you keep those separate and make sure you're hitting both of those. The easiest way to do so, especially for any financial aid deadlines, like I said, fill it out as soon as you can, hopefully on or before December 1st. So we do have our first question. I'm gonna touch on this one because it's a really common question. Is it true that the earlier one fills out the FAFSA, the more likely one is to get scholarship and aid? So I'm gonna answer that part of it first. So the answer is you're partially correct. So scholarships often have their own set of criteria, own set of deadlines. Depending on the college or university, a lot of times those deadlines are associated with just completing the FAFSA by that deadline. So in order to be eligible, you have to do it. So from that perspective, yes, you're definitely going to want to hit that deadline. There are some types of federal financial aid that are first come, first served. So in that case, yes, you would also want to complete the FAFSA as soon as possible to make sure that you get in front of the front of that line if you're eligible. So this was kind of a two-part question. The follow-up question to that was, if so, how does that affect those who have to wait until December 1st versus those invited to submit as early as October 1? So that's a really good point by this attendee that some folks have been able to complete the FAFSA already. I would say that realistically, this is kind of a non-issue, largely because when we start talking about the number of students that are able to submit before October 1st, we're talking probably the Department of Ed isn't giving a hard and fast number, but we're talking less than, we'll say 10,000 students nationwide. And when we look at that from the entire universe of folks who really first-time students that completed the FAFSA last year, which is well over 2 million, we're talking about a very, very small percentage that will be essentially ahead of in the front of the line for any of these types of aid. So good question, legitimate question. I would say, it's really not something that you would want to even be concerned about. So I'm going to answer one more and then I'm going to move on to the next slide. So the student is a sophomore in high school, so they don't need to fill out the FAFSA until after they graduate high school. So I would say that is not a correct statement. You're always going to you're going to want to fill out the FAFSA a year in advance of when you plan on enrolling. So The FAFSA that opens on December 1st, so the one that we have coming up here in about a month and less than a month and a half, that's going to be for the 25-26 academic year. So that would be for students who plan on attending college in the fall of 2025. So essentially, your senior year of high school, that's when you're going to want to complete the FAFSA for that upcoming academic year. So great question. All right, and we're going to keep moving on. And I know that there are other questions in the queue. Gang, I've done quite a few of these. I find that it's best that I answer some questions, I move on, come back to the questions because, like I said earlier, sometimes I answer the questions that people are asking in the Q&A. So, all right, we're moving right along here. So, getting started with the FAFSA, and folks, it sounds silly, but this is one of the biggest things that needs to be done. Sometimes people find it to be the most challenging thing to do when completing the FAFSA. It's definitely one of the most important things. So every person who is associated with the FAFSA needs to get a federal student aid ID or an FSA ID. So this would be definitely the student and at least one, potentially both parents, depending on if it's a single parent or two-parent household, and depending on how they filed taxes. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. So the FSA ID, this is something that you have to apply for, and you do so at studentaid.gov, as it says on the slide. And you'll also keep in mind that this acts as an electronic signature for, for all federal student aid documents. So that includes your FAFSA. And if you were looking to get any federal student loans, it acts as a signature for that as well. The things you'll need for your FSA ID is your full name, your social security number, and your date of birth. That's it. That's all you need, but you do need those three things. And we also strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to obtain that FSA ID before you start the FAFSA. And you actually have to do that at this point. So in order to access the FAFSA, you have to have your FSA ID. We encourage you to do that ahead of time, at least 3 to 5 business days ahead of time. And I mentioned that the FAFSA doesn't open until December 1st. You can actually get your FSA ID right now. There's nothing holding you back from getting your FSA ID immediately. Now, the follow-up question that we usually have when it comes to FSA ID is usually from the parent's perspective. They say, hey, we have an older sibling that is in college. So the parent already has an FSA ID. Do they need to get a new one or a different one? And the answer is no. It's attached to you as the person. So again, social security number, date of birth, and your full name. That's associated with that FSA ID. So once you get it, it's yours. It's yours for life. So think of it from that perspective. So any student would need to get their own FSA ID. The other piece with getting started is multi-factor authentication, or sometimes folks will refer to it as two-step verification. So this was something new a couple of years ago. And, a lot of people kind of looked at it and they were wondering, what exactly is this? And I'm guessing a lot of you you've already experienced this, whether it be with a banking app or a credit card or something like that, where you log in using a username and a password. But then they also send you a text or they send you an email with a 6 or an 8-digit code that you have to plug in to verify that, yep, I am who I say I am. So that's all this is. When you set up your FSA ID, it being the Department of Education, is going to ask you, where do you want this code sent? So it can be sent via text, it can be sent via email, or you can even set up an authentication app. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that when you make that choice, when you set up your FSA ID, you're going to want to use as permanent of a phone number as you can, knowing that, sometimes we change phone numbers, but use a good phone number, as well as use an email address that is going to travel with you. When I say that, what I really mean is especially for students, I would discourage you from using your high school email address because oftentimes once you graduate, that email address is purged. You'll want to either set up like a Gmail account or something like that that you can access throughout, that you don't have to worry about it being deleted or purged once you graduate. Once you set up multi-factor authentication or two-step verification, the Department of Education will also give you a backup code. A lot of times folks are like, backup code, what is this backup code? It's simply a code that if for some reason you change cell phone numbers, change email addresses, and you don't have access to that multi-factor authentication, that will still allow you to log into your federal student aid account. That'll still allow you to log into FAFSA. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do once you get logged in is update your email address, update your cell phone number so that you can access it the more traditional way. So with that said, backup code's only going to be given once. So they give it to you. It's probably best if you take a screenshot, print it out, write it down, do whatever you have to do, put it in a secure place. Odds are you'll never need it, but if you do need it, you're definitely going to want to have it. So, all right, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions here. So first question I have is, what are the interest rates? I'm assuming we're talking about federal student loans with that one. So the interest rates will change from year to year. It is set based on the 10-year Treasury note, which we're probably going a little bit deeper than we need to there. But as of this year, and I'll be honest, gang, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I believe it's in the 6 to 7% range. So keep that in mind. This is something that will change every year. It's fixed based on that one singular year, but the following year, if you choose to take out a student loan again, then that'll have a different interest rate. So, all right, we have another question here about Social Security. When my daughter turns 18, you'll lose payments, which will drop the income. Do you do anything different if you have a change in income? And that's really, this is a really good question. This is something that I believe we're going to touch on a little bit, but I'll give a little bit of a spoiler alert here. Anytime you have a reduction in income, or you have really what I would call a life-changing event where something changes that has a negative impact, colleges and universities do allow for something, and the Department of Ed does via the colleges and universities, called a special circumstances. This allows the school to be able to update things like your income, things like assets, things that can help you pay for school if it doesn't accurately reflect what had to be reported on the FAFSA. So I always tell folks, you have to answer the FAFSA in the manner that they are asking the questions. They're asking the questions, you have to answer them the way that based on what they're asking. With that said, if that answer doesn't reflect real life, that's where you can go to the school's financial aid office and say, hey, something's different here. We need to talk about it. And they will gladly help you with that. So great question. So next question, income related questions are based on your 2023 federal tax returns. Are asset valuations related, tied to a specific date? So the answer to that is yes. I mean, so first, you're correct. 2023 federal tax returns will be the tax information that's being pulled over for this upcoming FAFSA. The asset valuation is tied to the date of the FAFSA. So keep that in mind as well. So income 2 years ago, assets as of today. And that oftentimes those valuations are done by you. You have to make that determination. You have to make that valuation. So next question, if we have a FAFSA account and we have to wait until December 1st, should we be notified by email? And I'm assuming you're asking, will they notify you when the FAFSA is open? And I'll be honest, I don't think so. I think they being the Department of Education, They're not, when the switch is flipped and the FAFSA is on, they're not going to send out an email blast. They may send something out a little after the fact saying, hey, yeah, gang, FAFSA is open now. But I mean, I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't anticipate it like Johnny on the spot right away. So keep that in mind. So next question, how many schools do you need to list on the December application? So I don't know that there's a limit or a number that you need to list. I guess if we're saying how many do I have to list in order for it to truly be processed, that number is just one. You just need one school on there for the FAFSA to be processed, but you can list up to 20 on the FAFSA. So and also keep in mind that you can always add additional schools after the fact. So you don't have to have everything laid out, all the schools you want the information to go to right away. You can always add schools. You can take schools off as well. So the next question, last question, then I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Can a non-citizen student fill out the FAFSA? So the FAFSA is eligible to U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. So these would be really those that are eligible non-citizens, oftentimes referred to as green card holders. So those are the two types of students that would be eligible to complete the FAFSA. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next slide here, folks. A lot of great questions. I was telling Sydney before the webinar, I always love NSHSS webinars because you all are so engaged. So I appreciate it. We're going to move on, but we're going to come back to the questions in just a little bit. So that was a really good transition question because some of the additional information you need for the FAFSA is your social security number or alien registration number if you aren't a U.S. citizen. So those are the two types of identifiers you need to be eligible to complete the FAFSA. Any record of money earned if you didn't file taxes. So also, we talked a little bit about assets, current bank statements and investment records, if applicable. So they are going to ask about both of those. So if you have, money in a bank account, if you have investments, outside of any type of retirement investments, you are going to need to have those. Any records of untaxed income. Again, we talked about email address and mobile phone number. And we also talked about that list of colleges that you'll need. Now, one of the things that is no longer on the list that we talked about what tax year you needed. One of the things that's no longer there is tax returns. And the reason being is starting last year, the FAFSA automatically interfaced with the IRS through something called the Future Act Direct Data Exchange, or FADDX. And it's a major part of the FAFSA, but it's a simple checkbox, quite honestly. Checkbox and you get providing consent, where what it does behind the scenes is you authorize the U.S. Department of Education to pull your information over from the IRS. It does it automatically once you provide consent through the FAFSA. It's no longer a kind of a clunky interface like they used to have. Very slick, very easy to use. Checkbox, I consent, boom, it comes over, you're good to go. Now, one thing that is different from the old interface that they had is that you don't actually see the tax information that comes over. So you may still want to have a copy of your 1040s just in case, but realistically, all of that information comes over behind the scenes and you don't have to worry about it. So, all right, good stuff there. And you'll definitely want to have copies of like your W-2s as well, just in case. Again, not necessary, but keep them handy just in case. So got a couple of other questions here. So question, if I'm starting college in the fall of 2025, I don't need to fill out the form 2425. That is correct. So if you go to studentaid.gov right now, the only FAFSA that will be open is the 2024-25 FAFSA. You can fill it out and it's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to help you either. So keep that in mind. If you're a senior right now, you don't plan on starting college until fall of 2025, you're going to have to wait until December 1st. Next question is, do both parents have to fill out the FSA ID or just one? It's a really good question. And honestly, it depends. I'm smiling because that seems to be a fallback answer for all financial aid questions is it depends. It depends on your tax filing status is why it depends. So if you filed married, filing jointly, you only need one FSA ID for the parents because it's going to be able to pull over all of that tax information for both parents because it's on one tax form. If you filed married filing separately, you're going to need two. So that's the big difference. It's how your tax filing status is. So great question. Do you need to know what college you're going to before you fill out the FAFSA? Do you need a letter of acceptance? Another great question. And the answer to that is no. You can send your FAFSA information to whatever schools you're even looking at. You don't need to be accepted. It's a totally separate process. So feel free, and I always encourage folks, even if you're not sure, go ahead and send that FAFSA information. It's not going to hurt you, folks. It can only help you in the long run because it'll streamline the process. If you do decide to apply, and when you get accepted, it helps speed things up. So great question there. Can you use the parent's phone number or email to sign up for the FSA ID? So I'm assuming what this question is really asking, if I'm a parent, can my student use the parent's uh, email address and and cell phone number for the FSA ID? The U.S. Department of Education strongly discourages that, and it has everything to do with the multi-factor authentication. Uh, it's just it messes with the system. It confuses the system because it's then identifying one email address with two separate accounts. All of a sudden, it runs into issues. So I would strongly encourage, and I get what you're saying, but I would strongly encourage you to set up a separate email address, use the student's cell phone number, go about it that way. Next question is the student ID a separate account from the FAFSA account? So we need to just make sure that we're level setting here. So FSA ID is Federal Student Aid ID. This is access to all U.S. Department of Education Federal Student ID or Federal Student Aid information. So that would include the FAFSA. That would include your anything to do with student loans. So I'm gonna assume that's what you mean when you say FAFSA account. So that is the FSA ID. Now, when we start talking about student IDs, that's a whole different thing that's usually associated just with your whatever school you're at or you're looking to go to. So FSA ID is kind of your one-stop ID for all things financial aid, FAFSA, student loans, and so forth. All right, so next question, and then we're going to move on. So if filing joint in taxes, do both parents need to get an FSA ID individually? Hey, we kind of already answered this, so the answer to that is no. If you've filed joint taxes, only one parent needs that FSA ID. All right, great questions, folks. All right, we're going to keep moving forward here, hopefully. There we go. All right. So one of the things that was new to the FAFSA 2 years ago, and this is why both the student and the parent need their own separate FSA ID, is it's now what the Department of Ed would refer to as role-based. Um, it's a role-based FAFSA. So all users will be required to not only log in using their FSA ID and their password and that multi-factor authentication, but they're then going to be asked essentially by the FAFSA, hey, what's your role? Are you a student or are you a parent? Part of the reason they do that is I talked about the FADDX. and providing consent to have that tax information pulled over. So, very important, identify your role. That way you can provide consent and you can pull that information over. Now, oftentimes we get this question as to, okay, who actually starts it first though? The parent or the student? The reality of it is that it doesn't matter. So if you're logging in as a parent, it's going to ask you to identify the student and then that using student information. So name, date of birth, social security number, address. Similarly, if you're a student, it's going to ask you to invite your parent and it's going to ask that same information. So there are some major organizations like the National College Attainment Network that have been very vocal in saying, hey, we want the parent to start the FAFSA because oftentimes the student doesn't necessarily know what the parent's definitely social security number is, but in some cases they don't know their birthday. And I'll be honest, I'm 47 years old. I'm one of those kids. I know their birthday. I don't know their date of birth. Like I have to really think about it. Okay, when was dad born? When was mom born? Those types of things. So just backtracking a little bit, uh, user-based roles, either the parent or the student can start it, but you're going to have to, in order to essentially tie together, one's going to have to know the other's personal information. So obviously name, date of birth, social security number, and full address. So that is user-based roles. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions before we move forward. So every year when you're borrowing money, do you get an option to refinance earlier year borrowed loan? So the answer to that is probably not. So definitely not with the U.S. Department of Education. There is some, you do have an option to, or there are options, I should say, to consolidate or refinance. But generally speaking, it's usually best to wait until after graduation, or at least after separation from college or university, just largely because there are essentially student protections built in while they're still enrolled. The once you go down the path of refinancing, it ceases to be especially if you refinance from a private lender, it then ceases to be a federal loan. It's now a private loan. Uh, Odds are you'll have to start repayment immediately. It just gets messy. So we always encourage folks, hey, just hold off until after you're graduated. Take a little bit of time to assess your situation and then move forward. So next question, are pensions considered as income reportable on the FAFSA? So the short answer is not unless you are actively drawing from that pension. So if you're drawing from it, at that point, it most likely will show up as taxable income. Then it's just going to be reported through your taxes. But if you're talking about like a pension or a 401k, 401(k), or 403(b), those are retirement specific accounts that will not be they're sheltered. You don't have to report them on your FAFSA. So similar question, does your retirement account count in the evaluation? The answer is no, as long as it is in what they would refer to as a retirement specific savings vehicle. So you should be okay there. If a student turns 18 before they start college, do you apply based on your income or her income? So I think we're talking about dependency status there. And I do believe that is actually our next slide. So what a great segue. I swear that wasn't a plant, but gang, this is why I answer, we move forward and we do this. So when we start talking about dependency and whose information needs to be on the FAFSA, I want you to just keep in mind that the U.S. Department of Education has a very different idea of what dependency is compared to, say, who is claimed on taxes, or quite frankly, is the student paying for their own college? So I'm asking you, and I know that oftentimes folks will kind of maybe get upset about it, but definitely, start to say things are fair, they aren't fair. Just keep in mind, these are the criteria that the U.S. Department of Education puts forth to decide whether a student is dependent or independent. When we talk about dependent students, those are students that have to provide parental information in addition to their own on the FAFSA. An independent student is someone that does not have to provide parental information on the FAFSA. And in order to be considered independent, and you can see the list on the screen, the student has to be married. They have to be pursuing a graduate or professional degree. Now, also keep in mind when we talk about pursuing a graduate or professional degree, that means in the eyes of the U.S. Department of Education, that student is taking graduate level coursework. So 500 level coursework or higher, because there are direct admission programs or guaranteed admission programs for certain professional programs, whether it be law school, pharmacy, heck, in some cases, maybe even doctorate programs. But the student for the Department of Education, they have to be taking 500 level coursework, graduate level coursework, in order to be considered pursuing a graduate or professional degree. Birth date, they have to be 24 or older. The student has to have dependents who receive more than 50% of their support from the student has to provide 50% or more of the support for a dependent child. The student is active duty military or veteran. This does not include the National Guard unless they are active duty National Guard, that they've been called up. And even then, it's only at that time. If they are considered an orphan, they are in foster care, or they were at some point determined as a ward of the court. If they are considered an emancipated minor, and I can't stress this enough, this is subject to the state law. So I live in Ohio. Ohio does not have an emancipated minor law. So when I worked on campus, as soon as I saw that checked yes by a student who is a resident of Ohio, that was immediate red flag for me. It just meant that they probably didn't understand the question and they answered yes. So again, check your state law. Do you have an emancipated minor law? Understand it. Are you in a legal guardianship? And are you homeless or at risk of homelessness? If you cannot answer yes to any one of those questions, you are considered a dependent student and you would need parental information. So keep that in mind. So we're going to go back to the Q&A for just a little bit here. So how many bank statements are requested for the FAFSA? So it's not necessarily how many bank statements. What they're really asking for when they start asking about, how much money do you have in checking? How much do you have in savings? It's how much do you have right now at the time you complete the FAFSA? So really, I guess technically, to answer the question, they just need one, and it's the most recent one. And quite frankly, most schools will not ask for that information. The Department of Education does not ask for you to validate that information by, scanning that document in and submitting it with your FAFSA. So in a lot of ways, it is the honor system. And that is covered with the last page of the FAFSA. When you sign it, you are saying that the information you've provided is accurate based on your knowledge, based on today. So, and there are repercussions if they find that they are deliberately inaccurate. So, as I always tell folks, just answer honestly, and you'll have nothing to worry about. So next question, what do you do if your income has changed about $30,000 since your taxes, the reported taxes on the FAFSA? So I talked about this a little bit earlier. That's what we would call a special circumstances application. So you do have to answer the questions as they are stated on the FAFSA, but knowing that it's different, that's where after the fact you can engage with the financial aid office. So once you fill out the FAFSA, once that financial aid office acknowledges that they've received your FAFSA, That's when you're going to want to call them, email them, raise your hand in any way, shape, or form and say, hey, this is different than real life. Mo Actually, every school will have some type of process, usually a form or an application for you to fill out. You'll most likely have to provide some supporting documentation, but they can then adjust that income on the FAFSA. That's something the school has to do. Unfortunately, you cannot do that. So, all right, next question. If divorced, do both parents declare income or just the parent who claims the child on the taxes? So it's only one parent, and it's the parent who provides more than 50% of the financial support for the student. And look at this, we've got another one of those perfectly timed questions when we start talking about, hey, who is considered a parent and which parent do does the student put on the FAFSA? So we're going to start with who's considered a parent. So it's going to be biological or adoptive parents and certain step parents. You're going to want to include both parents if the parents are married or if they're not married, but they live together. So if both parents are cohabitating, so they're in the same house, even if they're not married, you would include both of them. Just a reminder that married parents do include same-sex couples. And if the parents are separated, but they're still living together, you would put married on the FAFSA. So this is really to the heart of the question that was just asked. In the case of divorce or separation, you would provide information only about the parent that provided the majority of the financial support in the last 12 months. And if that parent is remarried, then you would also include the step parents information. So, so something to keep in mind there is, yes, in the situation of a split household, it's going to be the parent who provides the most support. And if that parent is remarried, the step parents information will also need to go on there. We know that, gang, we know and we acknowledge that this can be a complicated question. So we really encourage folks, there's a URL there on the screen. It's studentaid.gov. So again, this is the US Department of Education. It provides really good guidance as to helping to identify which parent is the parent of record for the FAFSA. So a couple more questions before we move forward. So is alimony and or spousal support considered untaxed income? So honestly, that really depends on how it's reported on the taxes. So I'm not terribly familiar with alimony or spousal support. If it has to be reported as taxed income, it's going to show up on your 1040 as such. If not, if you don't have to report it as taxable income, it will be asked on the FAFSA as for you to list your untaxed income. That's where you would put that information. So the next question, if you don't file federal taxes, but a local and state tax form, what documentation is then required since there's not an IRS data exchange available? So that's a case where in those situations, you are required and can manually input your tax information. That is one of the very few exceptions allowing you to manually input your tax information into the FAFSA. So in the case of a tax return being filed from Puerto Rico, that is definitely a case where you would manually key in your tax information. So great question there. So the next question, do they pull both federal and state information automatically? They only pull federal information because quite frankly, that's all they need. That's all they're going to want. So in that case, to answer the question as it's written, nope, they just do federal, but the reason they only do federal is because that's all they need. So next question is the form states that annuities are excluded from assets. What kind of annuities are excluded? There are many forms of annuities. So again, we are going to move forward because it looks like we've got a string of questions about assets. And that is actually our next slide. So let's talk a little bit about reporting assets on the FAFSA. So we're going to start with the things that need to be included. So vacation homes and or investment properties. So I always like to really say, folks, it's the non-primary residence. So if you own any type of property that isn't where you lay your head more than half of the time, that would, if you have a second property, that is considered either a vacation home or an investment property. um, Stocks and bonds. So this is where when we start talking about annuities, things of that nature, if it is outside of, and gang, this is the best way to think of it, the best way of putting it. If it lies outside of a retirement specific investment vehicle. So that's where we start talking about 401ks, 403bs. If it lies outside of that, then yes, you would have to report it as an asset. So when we start talking about annuities, and a lot of times, this is where, gang, I'm going to be honest, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an investment banker. When I hear annuity, I think of like a whole life insurance policy. Uh, that is something that would have to be reported as an asset because you can cash it in at any time and there's no penalty for that. So think of it from that perspective. If you really have questions as to whether or not something is or isn't considered a quote unquote investment vehicle, I would encourage you to reach out to your financial advisor, whomever's managing that, and just talk to them about that because that's the threshold that the U.S. Department of Education puts on it. Is this a retirement investment in a retirement specific investment vehicle? If the answer is yes, you don't have to include it. If it's no, you have to report it as an asset. College savings accounts. So we have we have a question about college savings accounts, 529s here in the chat as well. 529s, if the owner is the student or the parent, it has to be included as an asset on the FAFSA, and it will be put under the parent's assets. So not as the student's. If it is a third party outside of the household that owns the account, so grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whomever outside of the household, no matter who is considered the beneficiary, if the owner of the account is outside of the household, then it does not have to be listed as an asset. So I don't want to, I hesitate to call it a loophole, but that's just the way that the regulations are structured on it. And then as we talk about we've had some questions about business and things of that nature. This was new as of a couple years ago. Adjusted net worth of a business or adjusted net worth of a family farm. Really, the adjusted part of it, the U.S. Department of Education, the FAFSA makes that calculation behind the scenes. All you have to do is identify what the net worth of the business or the family farm is. And people will often ask, well, how do I determine net worth? The simple formula is the value minus any outstanding debt. Like that's really what it is. Um, you can make that determination. You can have a financial advisor or banker, whomever. Again, we at Sallie Mae, we're not financial advisors, we're not accountants, so we don't make that determination. But that's really the simple equation is assets minus liabilities, and that's net worth. So things that you don't include on the FAFSA. So primary home, even if you own it outright, you don't have to include that on your FAFSA. Any retirement savings. So pensions, annuities, 401k. Again, if it is a retirement specific asset, you do not have to include it. And then any personal possessions. So car, furniture, clothes, those types of things. So, all right, I'm going to hit on some more questions here. So, how does the 529 investment come into play with FAFSA? So I think we've already touched on that. It does have to be reported as an asset if the student or the parent are the owners. If it's anyone else, it is not reported as an asset. So next question, if the student's parents take care of their parent and they are listed on the grandparents' account to take care of the bills, but the dollar isn't yours and you don't get a 1099, does that count as an asset to the parent? I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I totally understand the question. Um, so I understand if it's a case where you know, a parent is taking care of a grandparent. Uh, and they're listed on the grandparents account. I mean, if it's not the parent's account, even if they're, say it's a custodial account, that's not technically their funds, you don't have to put that on. You, as the parent, you do not have to list essentially the grandparents' income or assets because it's not yours, it's theirs. You may be listed as a custodian on their bank account, but those aren't your funds. So good question. So I mentioned if parents file taxes separately, they both need to send in a FAFSA, but that does not apply to divorced parents. So I want to be very clear on this. So if married parents file their taxes separate, they both need to log into the FAFSA. So they both need an FSA ID. They will both be tied to the student on one singular FAFSA. If the parents are divorced, then it defaults to which parent provides more than 50% of the financial support to the student. That's whose information then goes on the FAFSA. So next question, if your student is not starting college until fall 2025, is there any benefit to completing the 24-25 FAFSA? No, there's no benefit to doing that now. Wait until December 1st when the 25-26 FAFSA is open. At that point, you can go ahead and complete the FAFSA for the 25-26 school year. So what if the college application goes out late and the college wasn't on the original FAFSA list of schools? Um, Simply log back into the FAFSA and you can add school codes after the fact. So you don't have to have all of the schools listed immediately on the FAFSA. So in this case, hey, if you've got a school that all of a sudden you're like, wow, I really like this school. I think I want to apply to that school. You can always add schools late. Heck, you can add them after classes start if you really want to, or if you really have to. So keep that in mind. It's not a one-shot deal. You can always log in and add schools at any point in time. Uh, so what if the father has never been in the picture? Can the mother fill out the FAFSA and leave the father portion blank without causing any issues? I would say absolutely. That shouldn't be an issue whatsoever. You know, if there's no marital status or the father's been out of the picture for an extended period of time to where you could consider father separated legally or otherwise, that wouldn't be an issue at all. So next question. So student needs an FSA ID as well as um, I'm going to assume that it means parent needs an FSA ID. So yes, student and parent both need their own separate FSA ID. And if married filing jointly for the taxes, would you recommend the primary spouse set up the FSA ID? It really doesn't matter which spouse sets up the FSA ID at that point. As long as one of the parents sets it up, and that one, I mean, obviously, if they filed their taxes married filing jointly, if they're on the tax return, it's going to pull it in. It doesn't matter which spouse sets it up. So what are the steps if you have not filed the 2023 tax year yet? So I'll be honest, this is where it does get complicated because the U.S. Department of Education is pretty cut and dry about this. At this point, even though I mean, I think everyone acknowledges that there are extensions that can be filed and things of that nature. The Department of Education expects that at the time of FAFSA filing that your 2023 tax returns should be filed. So that's something that you may want to potentially broach with the financial aid office. I know we've mentioned special circumstances a couple of times now. That may be the case of special circumstances, depending on what the situation is. Like if it's a case of, say, like identity theft or something of that nature. But realistically, the Department of Ed, they're pretty cut and dry about that. That's part of the reason why they went to, and this is, I know we're jumping in a time machine here, but back in 2016, they changed the reporting year for tax reporting year for the FAFSA purposes for essentially 2 years prior to when the student will actually enroll. And that was a big reason for it, is they wanted to avoid sometimes those messy situations with extensions and things of that nature. So by bumping it back a year, they fully expect that tax returns will be completed at that point. So, all right, gang, I'm going to keep going here. I know we've got a lot of questions, but we're going to keep plugging along here. So we've been through assets. So just to give you a little bit of an idea as to what happens after it's submitted. So the student will receive what's called a FAFSA submission summary within a couple of days of FAFSA submission. And realistically, this is just a transcript of the FAFSA, but it also gives the student, and we're going to talk about it in just a bit, their student aid index number, as well as their reference number. So they'll get that information. And I'll hit a little bit more on student aid index number in just a bit, which helps to determine basic eligibility for federal aid. So if you're eligible for a Pell Grant or things of that nature, it'll display at that point. Keep in mind that the FAFSA submission summary does not include any financial information. So I've mentioned that with the FADDX, the tax information is getting pulled over automatically. It still does not show it on, it doesn't show it on the FAFSA, nor does it show it on the FAFSA submission summary. The college and university will get that information, but throughout this process, the student and the parent won't be able to see that information. So the college is included on your FAFSA. So we've mentioned multiple times about the school code, things of that nature. Whatever school codes you put on there, whatever colleges and universities you put on the FAFSA, they will receive your FAFSA information. Depending on the situation, and gang, I can tell you that these instances have dropped drastically. The college may request additional documentation, oftentimes called verification. Things like maybe some supporting tax documentation, although that has dropped substantially because of the FADDX. What they usually will ask is if it's a case of the student identifying as independent. Oftentimes, if they would historically or traditionally be seen as a dependent student, they're going to ask for documentation, really supporting that independent status. And I had mentioned on that FAFSA submission summary, it will generate a student aid index number. So those of you who have maybe been through this process before, you might remember something called an EFC, or an expected family contribution. That is no longer in existence. So they've replaced it with the student aid index number. And again, it's an index number. It helps the college and university determine what types of financial aid a student will receive and how much aid they'll receive. So I'm going to go back to the questions here. So someone's asking just basically, how do we go through this process? So first and foremost, get your FSA IDs. You can do that immediately. You could do that tonight if you wanted to. And then after that, on December 1st, you can fill out your FAFSA. Fill out your FAFSA. Student can start it or parent can start it. Doesn't matter. At that point, once that's completed, the information goes to the school for processing. And it's a little bit of a waiting game, but then you'll wait to hear from the school. So that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's the process. So next question is, I'm a single parent. My daughter gets Social Security. Does she have to declare that? She does not I think it says it doesn't have any taxes at all on it. So it really depends on what type of Social Security benefit it is. If it's considered taxable income, then it'll show up on a 1040 and it'll be pulled over from the IRS. If it's untaxed income, it really depends on the type of benefit it is. And again, realistically, that's going to be pulled over on the FADDX because if she's receiving any type of benefit, it's going to be seen, and they'll be able to identify it and they'll put it in that correct bucket. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. You should be okay there. So next question, is the parent's FAFSA account going to require their Social Security number? In most cases, yes. However, at this point, for this upcoming year, the U.S. Department of Education is allowing parents without a Social Security number to obtain an FSA ID. So normal circumstances, yes, but this year they are granting exceptions. So if you're a parent and you don't have a Social Security number, you can obtain an FSA ID this year. Next question, how does the student and the parent link their financial or their FAFSA accounts? So that's where when I had mentioned the identifying each other with their name, Social Security number, date of birth, and address, that's how they're going to link with each other. So at the end of either one, whoever starts it, the other is going to identify so if the parent starts it, they're going to identify the student with all of that information. If the student starts it, the parent's going to identify the student with all of that information. That's how they're going to link. That's how they're going to find each other, because you as a parent say, hey, I've started this. This is my child. And then once the child logs in using their FSA ID that already has their Social Security number, date of birth, address, and name, it's going to say, hey, those two, yep, parent, student, got them. So that's how it does it. So yeah, good question. Next question, I have a sibling who will probably be doing the FAFSA next year. Will my parents need to set up another FSA ID, or can they use the same one? Remember, FSA ID it's almost like a Social Security number. That follows you for life. So once they set it up for you, they won't need to set it up for themselves again. They already have theirs. Now, your younger sibling will have to set up theirs, but your parents already have theirs, so they'll be good. Should I still complete the FAFSA even if I don't expect to qualify for need-based aid? So I always encourage folks to complete the FAFSA, especially in their first year, for multiple reasons. One, depending on the college you look to go to, oftentimes they have their own aid, and they have very different criteria than what the U.S. Department of Education does. So there is that. And the other piece is oftentimes scholarships. And I know we haven't talked about scholarships in this presentation, but there are a lot of scholarships that do require a FAFSA being filed. They don't necessarily look at your student aid index number. They don't look at need. But what they do look at is they want to make sure that you are really pursuing all avenues of aid. And because of that, another reason I would strongly, strongly encourage everyone to complete the FAFSA. Next question, and then I'm going to move on. Will my financial aid change if I choose a pass, no pass, or credit or no credit option? I'm assuming that you're talking that these are academic options at the high school level. That will not change your aid. That will not change your aid. And even once you get into college, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole too terribly deep, but there are things called satisfactory academic progress. Realistically, it doesn't matter if you choose to take a class pass, fail, or credit. Well, credit, no credit, it does matter, but pass, fail, as long as you pass it, you're fine. Credit or no credit, again, we're going a little bit deep here, but you do have to be taking 4 credit classes to be eligible for federal student aid. So good question. All right, keep her moving on. Okay, so some of these we've already talked about. So I know I've referenced the student aid index number. This is just a number that reflects the output of the FAFSA formula, and it's not a reflection of what the family can or will pay. So keep that in mind. Schools just use it to determine what types and how much aid you'll receive. And the SAI can be reflected as a negative number as low as negative 1,500. So used to with the EFC, it would go down to 0. The SAI can go down as low as negative 1,500. It's just meant to help schools identify students who may need some additional help. So that's all it is. It doesn't necessarily allow for extra aid to those students. Some other things to keep in mind as you're both completing the FAFSA as well as just going through the process. Family size is based on the number of people claimed on the federal tax return. So keep that in mind. Now, that number is pulled over automatically from the IRS, but this is one of the few instances where you can freeform it into the FAFSA. So that's something that if you know that the number of people claimed on the taxes is incorrect, you can just put what it actually is into the FAFSA. And then the last one is the number of family members enrolled in college is no longer part of the federal formula. And this one is a little bizarre because they still ask this question on the FAFSA. It doesn't factor into the FAFSA formula any longer. So I know it's a little odd. I'm not sure why they even ask it, other than possibly that a college or university could look at that. But the reality of it is it has no impact on federal aid. All right, couple more questions. We're almost at the end of the formal presentation here, folks. So if my parents do not help me pay for college and I do, support myself, does that make me independent? So unfortunately, no. So we talked about this in an earlier slide where you have to hit certain criteria in order to be considered an independent student. So unfortunately, just that parents expect you to pay your own way or you support yourself, that is not one of those criteria. What I would encourage you to do in a case like that, talk to the financial aid office. You may be eligible for what's called an unusual circumstance, which is a little different from special circumstances. And we are actually going to talk about that in just a little bit. Our daughter is 17 years old. We adopted her when she was 9 months old. Her adoptive status means she's dependent. So I know that that we did go through that list of dependent versus independent. Boy, I'd have to back up the slide. It depends on when the adoption was done. So technically, because she is formally adopted, I do believe she would still be considered a dependent student, especially at her age of adoption. If she was adopted at a later age, I believe it's after the age of 13, I believe she would qualify as an independent student. But because she was adopted at such a young age, she is considered a dependent student. So next question, how soon do we hear back after we apply for the FAFSA? So you will hear from the U.S. Department of Education that it's been processed within 3 to 5 business days. It's really going to depend when from each individual school. It's just going to vary. Some will process and get you an award offer within weeks. Others may take months. So that's a situation where I would just encourage you to reach out to the college and university after you've received notice from the Department of Education that it's been processed, and also give it a little bit of time. So once you receive that from the Department of Education, I would encourage you to reach out to the school. Give it about 2 weeks because they have to receive that information. They have to process it as well. So just be patient, but I completely appreciate and understand it. You want that information as quickly as possible. So does FAFSA consider gross income or adjusted gross income during the process? Adjusted gross income. They actually look at two different metrics. So they will look at um, uh, amount earned from work, but then also adjusted gross income. So they do look at both of those, but the primary is adjusted gross income. When should I apply for a second college when transfer from another after 2 years? Would FAFSA have transfer scholarships? So FAFSA generally is just, it's basing it off of federal aid. So if you're talking about specifically like transfer scholarships, if you were going from a 2-year school to a 4-year school, that's something that I mean, I would still strongly encourage you to complete the FAFSA. And you're going to want to do that every year. But when probably that year before you're looking to transfer from the 2-year to the 4-year school, usually those 4-year schools have transfer coordinators. Really get in contact with them, see what they have to offer, what those if they do offer transfer scholarships, what those criteria are, and they should be able to help you out there. So, all right, I'm going to move on. We've got a couple more slides here. So I know we've mentioned special circumstances multiple times here, but this is when you would want to contact the financial aid office. When something happens, and I've said it, where really what's on the FAFSA doesn't reflect real life. And these are some examples. So if you've had a loss or reduction in your income, you've had death or serious illness in the family that has impacted the income situation, natural disasters that have affected income or assets. If you've had major medical or dental expenses not covered by insurance, and when I say major, folks, I'm talking like thousands and even tens of thousands. I know a lot of times, it's all about scope and perception. But from a Department of Education standpoint, a couple $1,000 really, it's not going to move the needle, unfortunately. So we're talking about really large numbers here. And then financial responsibility for elderly grandparents. And I'll take it one step further. So if there are other members in the household that have special needs that require additional care that are costly, that's something else that can be reviewed as well. So all right, gang, and I think all right. So I know we've gone through a lot of the questions. We do have a handful more we're gonna cover here before we move on for the evening. So do you have to report a child's income from a summer job or a paid internship? So the short answer is yes. So anytime when the child provides consent from the IRS, it's going to pull that information over, even if they didn't file their taxes. So as long as their employer reported their income, it's going to be there. You just have to provide consent and it'll come over. Now, I'm going to follow that up by saying a lot of times people think that a summer job or an internship or a paid internship, that's going to hurt their chances for financial aid. Students have what's called income protection allowance, and I can't remember the exact number because it kind of creeps up every year, but I believe it's $9,700. A student can make up to $9,700 before a single penny is counted towards their SAI. So keep that in mind. If they're making that kind of money on a summer job, like that's awesome, good for them. But again, basically that first almost $10,000 is sheltered. Is your FSA ID an actual number? Generally speaking, no, it is not. It's usually actually your email address or your phone number. So I guess technically it's a number, but realistically, FSA ID is just your phone number or email address or some other username that you identify. So for college savings accounts in a divorced family, if the holder of the college savings account is not the parent filing the FAFSA, do we include it? And the answer to that is yes, because it is still a parent. They're still at the core of it. They are still, because it's a parental asset, even if it's the non-custodial parent, they would still say yes, that is to be included. The only exception is if it is like a grandparent, aunt, uncle, anytime you're talking about a biological parent, whether it be custodial or non-custodial, in terms of a 529, they are going to want that included. So good question. Um, is a foreign property to be reported? So again, the answer is yes. Even if it is not in the US, is that an asset? Can you essentially liquidate that asset regardless of where it's at? If the answer is yes, you have to report it. So if the investment property is shared with a third party, do you report 50% of ownership? So I think that the easy answer is yes. If it truly is a shared property and you split everything 50-50, then I would say you would have to report 50% of that, whatever the net value is, as an asset on your FAFSA. So yes. Uh, do we need to do the FAFSA every year? Yes, yes, you do. Do it, for, like I said, for the upcoming academic year, 25-26, December 1st. After that, it should be October 1st every year. So yep, you have to do it every year. Um, I'd mentioned that there's no benefit for filing the 24-25 FAFSA. But what about an early enrollment for summer or bridge programs during 24? So, so that is I'm going to say, I've said it earlier, that's going to be an it depends. So summer is an interesting term in terms of financial aid. Uh, schools have schools have the ability to use it as either the first term of a academic year or the last term. It's really going to depend on what that school uses it for. So if it is the first term of their academic year or for financial aid um, purposes, they call it a header, then you would use the 25-26 FAFSA. If it is the last one or a trailer, then you would use the 24-25 FAFSA. So if it's a trailer 24-25, at that point it would be pulling the 2022 taxes. So, and again, that all happens behind the scene. You don't even need to necessarily have to pull out those forms or anything. You just provide consent, it'll automatically pull that out. So that's a really good question. Unfortunately, it depends. So I would encourage you to just reach out to your school and ask them that question, which FAFSA you would need to fill out for a summer term. So did I had mentioned life insurance policies must be reported on the FAFSA. Whole life insurance policies are. So those are considered to be not necessarily an annuity, but it's, oh goodness. Well, yeah, actually, it is an annuity. So it is not considered a retirement specific uh, asset. So yes, you would have to report a whole life insurance policy. When we talk about annuities that don't have to be reported, that's something along the lines of a structured annuity or something that can't be accessed immediately. So whole life, you can cash those out at any point in time. If there are restrictions as to why or when you can pull it out, then you wouldn't need to report that. That would be considered an asset that cannot be touched. Um, can I delete my FSA ID because we only need one for joint parents? So I don't believe so. You would really have to contact the U.S. Department of Education to see if you can actually delete an FSA ID. Frankly, I mean, I don't know that there's any reason that you would need to have it deleted. Uh, think of it from the perspective of this is all it's information that the federal government already has. Like this isn't information that is floating out there in the ether. Yeah, it's the U.S. Department of Education that has it, but realistically, it's all under the umbrella of the federal government. So the IRS has your information. Social Security Administration has your information. Depending on whether you fly, yeah, Department of Transportation, it's the government. They've got your information. If you really want to pursue it, I would contact the FAFSA hotline and see if they can help you out there. So Gang, those are all the questions we have for this evening. As always, I really appreciate your time this evening. I really appreciate your engagement. I want to thank NSHSS for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, just as a reminder, you will receive a recording of the session. Again, hopefully this is helpful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your engagement. And yeah, have a wonderful evening and best of luck with the FAFSA and your next steps as you pursue your post-secondary education. Have a great evening. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.